"Arrest her!" Andrea screamed. "She doesn't belong here." The girl dropped her magnifying glass and backed away, crying. "She's 7!" someone yelled, but the officers didn't flinch. Not until the woman in the blue blazer stepped forward and said quietly, "That's my daughter." It started with a rock, a little glittery thing half buried in the mulch by the mailbox. To most people, it would have looked like nothing. But to Wendy Davidson, it looked like treasure. She crouched down on the edge of Maple Street, her pink bicycle tipped over behind her, her sparkly unicorn backpack sliding off one shoulder. With quiet concentration, she brushed a leaf aside and tilted the stone into the sun, then pulled out her purple plastic magnifying glass, the one her teacher gave her yesterday, and leaned in with wonder in her eyes. In that moment, she was just a kid, 7 years old, excited, free, and completely unaware that someone was watching her, not with curiosity but suspicion. Across the street, Andrea Smith adjusted the blinds in her kitchen window. From her pristine home, she had the perfect view of the cul-de-sac. Her coffee sat untouched. The blinds had barely snapped back in place from the last time she peeked out. She'd been watching that child for nearly 10 minutes now. Andrea didn't like unknowns in her neighborhood. She especially didn't like ones who didn't wave back. She watched Wendy kneel by the mailbox cluster, holding something in her hand. Andrea squinted. Was that some kind of device? A tool? Her lips pressed into a tight line. The girl hadn't said hello when she rode by earlier. Didn't look familiar, didn't belong. Andrea grabbed her phone. But Wendy wasn't thinking about belonging. She was thinking about her dad. He used to say rocks held secrets if you looked close enough, that even the ugliest stone could be hiding a sparkle. He'd show her how to tilt it, turn it, watch for the light. That was before his last deployment. Before the folded flag and the white-gloved handshake. Now Wendy hunted rocks the way other kids hunted fireflies, like it kept him close. She looked through the magnifying glass and smiled. Then she heard the door slam across the street. Andrea didn't say hello, didn't smile, didn't ask a question. She stormed across the lawn like she was putting out a fire. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Wendy blinked up at her, confused. I found a rock." With that, Andrea pointed at the magnifying glass like it was a weapon. "What is that? Are you messing with the mailboxes?" "No, I was just—" Wendy held it up. "I'm looking, like for science." "You live here?" Wendy hesitated. The number, was it 412 or 421? "I think 412. Maple Street. I just moved here." "You don't even know your address." Andrea's voice turned cold. "Where's your mother?" "She's at work. She's a police helper. I mean, she's really important." Andrea crossed her arms. "Yeah, sure." And then she dialed 911. Inside a crowded municipal building just 5 minutes away, Chief Sarah Davidson stood at the head of a council chamber. She was mid-presentation, talking about de-escalation policies and community trust. The irony would only hit her later. When her department-issued phone buzzed in her pocket, she ignored it once. Then again. Then once more. Only when the screen lit up with a dispatcher alert did her heart stop cold. Suspicious juvenile. Maple Street. Unconfirmed location. Possible mailbox tampering. Minor may match your daughter's description. Sarah didn't say a word. She just grabbed her coat, whispered something to the mayor's aide, and left. Back on Maple Street, Wendy's hands were starting to shake. Andrea was filming now. "This child is tampering with mailboxes. Doesn't know her address. Has some kind of tool. I've reported it," she said into her phone, walking slow circles around the girl like a shark. Wendy clutched her unicorn backpack close, trying to breathe. That's when she heard the sirens. Far away at first, then closer. Too close. She backed up. The magnifying glass slipped from her fingers, hit the sidewalk, and shattered. Andrea didn't flinch. 3 squad cars rolled up. Officers stepped out. Andrea waved them over, already talking. "She doesn't live here," she said. "She gave me a fake address. And she dropped that thing right there. She's been acting erratic." I was concerned. Wendy's lip quivered. She didn't even know what erratic meant. The tallest officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, we'll handle it. Please step back." Someone across the street shouted, "She's 7." But the officers didn't flinch, not until the woman in the blue blazer stepped onto the sidewalk, eyes locked on her daughter, and said quietly, "That's my daughter." The words hit the air like thunder after lightning. Everything slowed. The officers turned. Andrea's jaw twitched. Wendy looked up, her knees still trembling, her hands stained with dirt and tiny glass shards. Sarah Davidson stepped fully into view. No badge, no uniform. Just a light blue blazer and black slacks, the calm armor of a woman who had built a career walking into rooms full of power and demanding to be heard. But this moment wasn't about power. This moment was about her daughter. She walked past Andrea without acknowledging her, walked past the officers like they weren't even there, walked straight to the 7-year-old girl with tears on her cheeks and fear in her eyes. "Baby," Sarah knelt down. "Are you hurt?" Wendy shook her head, but her voice wavered. "I broke it. I broke the glass. I didn't mean to. She scared me. I thought I did something bad." Sarah's chest tightened. Her daughter didn't understand what had just happened, but Sarah did, and so did the officers. "Ma'am," one of them finally said, stepping closer, "can you confirm your name and your relation to the child?" Sarah stood. Her voice was cool, unshaken, unapologetic. "I'm Chief Sarah Davidson. Wendy is my daughter. We live at 421 Maple Street, the home with the black shutters and the silver mailbox, 2 houses from the corner." A pause. Then she turned toward Andrea. "And you are?" Andrea's mouth opened and closed. The red blazer that had looked so bold moments ago now clashed violently with the truth unraveling around her. Her eyes darted toward the officers, toward the neighbors starting to gather, toward her phone still recording. I didn't know," she said. "She didn't look like... she didn't say..." She gave the wrong address. "She's 7, Sarah said sharply. She mixed up the numbers, because she was scared, because an adult twice her size was accusing her of a crime for collecting rocks. "She had something in her hand," Andrea argued. "I thought she was tampering with..." "A magnifying glass," Sarah snapped. "Her teacher gave it to her yesterday. She's in 2nd grade. You thought a child with a toy was a threat." Andrea stepped back, as if the truth stung more than any insult could. But Sarah wasn't finished. She turned to the officers, now awkwardly silent. "I want this documented," she said. "Full report, names, badge numbers, timeline. If my daughter's name went into dispatch records as a suspect, it gets removed today, and I want the original 911 call pulled and preserved." "Yes, Chief," one officer mumbled. The rookie among them, Officer Daniels, looked visibly shaken. His hand hovered near his vest, unsure of what to do next. Sarah looked back down at Wendy, who was still holding the shattered magnifying glass like it was her fault. "Mommy," Wendy whispered, "am I in trouble?" Sarah exhaled slowly. She crouched again, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "No, baby, you're not in trouble. You're in the right place. You're home." On the porch across the street, Mrs. Chen stood frozen, watering can tilted in mid-air. Mr. Rodriguez stepped out of his garage and took off his work gloves. One by one, neighbors emerged, from garages, kitchens, driveways, drawn by the sirens, the shouting, and now, the truth. Andrea tried to walk away. Sarah's voice stopped her. "You called 911 on a child," she said. "You used your fear to trigger a system that doesn't always stop to ask questions. You put my daughter at risk, not because she did anything wrong, but because she didn't look like your idea of safe." "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did," Sarah said coldly. "You meant exactly what you did, and you didn't stop to think what it could cost." Andrea looked like she might cry, but Sarah had no sympathy left. Not right now. Wendy was still shaking, and Sarah knew exactly how many black children never made it home from moments like this. If you were Wendy's mother, what would you have done? Comment below, because these moments aren't fiction for every family. They're daily fears, and if this story hits you in the chest, Don't just scroll, hit subscribe. We tell the stories too often silenced. The officers started to disperse. Wendy's tears had finally stopped, but her hands still trembled. Her favorite rock was safe in her pocket, but the magic was gone now. Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. As they turned to walk home, Wendy whispered, "Do I still get to keep it?" "Of course," Sarah said softly. That rock didn't do anything wrong. But as they walked, Sarah knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The community saw what happened. The uniform didn't protect her daughter. The title didn't shield her from the assumptions made by a stranger, and Sarah Davidson had a lot to say about that. That night, Maple Street wasn't quiet. The sirens had faded, the uniforms were gone, but the whispers stayed, from behind windows, across fences, in hushed living rooms and Facebook neighborhood groups. Most of the block had watched something unfold that afternoon, something that made their stomachs twist. But nobody knew what to say about it, so they didn't say anything at all. Inside her kitchen, Andrea Smith stood at her sink with the lights off. Her phone sat face down on the counter, still buzzing every few minutes. Voicemails, messages, a few likes on the video she'd posted before everything unraveled. She hadn't taken it down. Not yet. The comments had turned on her too fast. "Is this real? Please tell me this is fake. She's 7? Her hands trembled as she wiped the rim of her coffee mug for the third time. It was like the whole world had flipped upside down. She'd just wanted to protect the neighborhood. She'd called because she thought something was off. She didn't mean for it to become this, but now she was the woman who called the police on a little girl holding a magnifying glass. 3 houses down, Sarah Davidson sat on the edge of Wendy's bed, watching her sleep. Wendy clutched her stuffed unicorn in one arm and the silver-speckled rock in the other. The same rock that started everything. Her cheeks were still puffy from crying. Her hair still smelled like outside and fear. Sarah hadn't left her side since they came home. She'd turned off the news, didn't check her phone, didn't answer the department's calls. Not yet. Her daughter had almost been arrested, or worse, for existing, in daylight, on her own street, and all the training manuals, community lectures, and policy drafts in the world couldn't explain how to process that. The next morning, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Someone had uploaded a blurry screenshot of the video before it was deleted. Someone else posted a long paragraph defending Andrea. "She was just doing what we're supposed to do. Report suspicious activity. Let's not jump to conclusions." Then came the replies. "A child with a toy is not suspicious. If she were white, this wouldn't have happened." She didn't even apologize. By noon, Andrea had turned off her notifications and taken the video down. But it was already too late. The clip had reached local news, Twitter, TikTok, and the phrase "she's 7" was now a trending sound. At the department, Chief Davidson sat across from the city's legal advisor. "We're getting pressure from all sides," the advisor said. "Some folks are calling it abuse of 911. Others are saying if we don't defend Andrea's right to call, it sets a bad precedent." Sarah didn't flinch. "She weaponized your officers," she said flatly, "against a child." "I understand, Chief, I do." "No," Sarah interrupted. "You don't." Her voice was low, controlled, but every word was laced with fire. "My daughter now believes she can be arrested for picking up a rock, that if she forgets her address, she'll be taken away. You don't understand what that does to a child, what it does to a mother." The room fell silent. Later that day, Andrea tried to go for a walk. She didn't make it far. A neighbor turned the other way. Another one crossed the street without looking at her. Even Mrs. Chen, who always waved from her garden, just shook her head and walked back inside. Andrea felt the walls closing in. Everything had changed. And yet, she still couldn't bring herself to knock on Sarah's door. Instead, she sat in her living room, hands folded in her lap, and whispered to no one in particular, "I didn't mean it like that." But intent didn't matter anymore, not to Wendy, not to Sarah, not to the neighborhood. Meanwhile, Wendy sat at the kitchen table, quietly sketching in her notebook. She wasn't drawing butterflies like she usually did. She was drawing police cars, and shadows, and her rock, the one that got her almost arrested. Sarah watched her from the doorway and felt something shift in her chest. A crack. This neighborhood was supposed to be their safe place. She'd worked double shifts, fought for the down payment, moved here for the school district, and still, it hadn't been enough. Not to keep Wendy safe from people like Andrea, not to shield her from what Sarah had spent her career trying to reform. Down the street, a meeting was quietly being planned. Mr. Rodriguez had had enough of the silence. He called Mrs. Chen, then the Johnsons, then the school counselor. "We have to talk about it," he said. "We can't pretend like it didn't happen." And so, on a quiet Saturday morning, the neighborhood association planned a gathering. Not to shame, not to point fingers, but to ask one very real, very American question. What happens when your bias nearly ruins a child's life and you're forced to face it in front of your own neighbors? The invitation was posted on every door in the neighborhood. A folded piece of paper, black and white, simple font. Community reflection gathering this Saturday, hosted at the Marlin Mansion lawn, 4 p.m., open to all residents of Maple Grove. No blame, no accusation, but everyone knew why it was happening. Everyone. Marlin Mansion looked like something out of a movie. Stone walls, manicured hedges, long shadows stretching across the lawn. A place where weddings happened, fundraisers, picture-perfect moments. But today, it felt different. There were folding chairs, a podium, clipboards, a row of lemonade jugs sitting untouched on a long plastic table. Neighbors came in slowly, some in pairs, some alone, some with shame, some with anger, all of them carrying something. Sarah Davidson arrived quietly, Wendy's small hand tucked into hers. Wendy wore her sparkly shoes again. Her purple magnifying glass was broken, but she'd brought the rock. She hadn't let it go all week. Sarah spotted Mrs. Chen first, then Mr. Rodriguez. They nodded respectfully, quietly, no words, just presence. Wendy stayed close. Sarah's fingers rested on her daughter's shoulder like a shield. 5 minutes later, Andrea arrived. She walked alone. Red blazer replaced by a grey cardigan, hair tied back, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. Her steps were slow, measured, but her chest was tight. She didn't sit in the back. She didn't sit in the front. She sat in the middle, surrounded by people who used to wave at her driveway and now didn't even make eye contact. Mr. Rodriguez stepped to the microphone. He cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice low but steady. "We're not here to argue. We're here to listen, to reflect, to own what happened on our street and what it revealed." A few heads nodded. A few eyes stayed on the ground. For the first half hour, voices rose and fell. A teacher from the elementary school spoke about implicit bias. Mrs. Chen read a prepared note about compassion and vigilance. A teenage boy from the block shared how often he'd been stopped walking home from track practice. Wendy just listened. She didn't understand every word, but she felt them. The weight, the sting, the ache. Sarah didn't speak. Not yet. She waited and watched. Andrea was still in the middle row, still silent, until someone said her name. "I think Andrea Smith should speak," a woman in the front said. "She made the call. She should say something." Andrea's spine straightened. All eyes turned to her. Sarah looked up too, her expression unreadable. Andrea stood slowly. Her chair scraped loudly against the stone patio. She walked to the mic. She didn't pull out notes, didn't have a speech. She took off her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes, and said, "I thought I was doing the right thing." Silence. "I saw a child I didn't recognize. I saw something in her hand. I assumed—" Her voice cracked. "I assumed wrong." Someone coughed. A baby cried softly in the back. Andrea swallowed. "I didn't know who she was, but that shouldn't have mattered. I didn't see a child. I saw a problem, and I didn't ask questions. I reacted." She looked toward Wendy, who shrank back a little behind her mother. Andrea's voice broke. "I'm sorry." The crowd remained quiet. some skeptical, some moved. Sarah watched it all without blinking. Andrea stepped away from the mic and sat down, eyes forward, hands folded, not expecting forgiveness, just breathing. Then Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat again. "We'd like to invite Chief Davidson to speak if she's willing." Sarah looked down at Wendy. Her daughter nodded once, tiny, brave, and still hurting. Sarah stood. She didn't speak as a chief. She spoke as a mother. "My daughter is 7 years old," she began. "She likes sparkly shoes, stuffed animals, and science. She believes rocks can hold secrets." That's what she was doing when someone decided she looked dangerous. The wind moved gently through the trees. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't understand the fear she saw in someone's eyes. But she felt it. She'll carry it. That doesn't go away. Her voice stayed calm, but every word hit like thunder. "And I'm tired," she added quietly. "I'm tired of watching the system I work for, the one I believe in, fail people like my daughter. Again and again." She glanced at Andrea. "An apology is a start, but change takes more than that. It takes courage. It takes discomfort. It takes facing what we don't want to admit." She stepped away from the mic. No applause, just wait and silence. The sun dipped lower behind the mansion. People began to shift in their seats. The meeting wasn't over, but something had shifted. Wendy tugged on her mum's sleeve and whispered, "Can we go home now?" Sarah nodded. She held her daughter's hand. As they walked past Andrea's row, Andrea stood. Just barely. She didn't say anything, but she looked Sarah in the eyes, not expecting anything in return. Sarah paused for a second. Her expression didn't change, but she didn't look away either, and still, nothing was resolved. Not yet. Because forgiveness isn't a speech, and healing isn't a vote. It's a long road, one that was only just beginning, and for now, everyone had to walk it together. Andrea didn't sleep the night after the community gathering, not really. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling fans spinning shadows on the walls. She could still hear Wendy's voice, soft and scared, saying, "Am I in trouble?" She could still hear her own voice from the day before, clipped and cold, demanding answers from a child like she was a suspect. She'd replayed it 100 times, 1,000. But there was one moment she kept returning to, when Sarah Davidson looked at her and didn't flinch, didn't yell, just stood there like a mountain, immovable, unshakable, and silent. That silence haunted her more than any insult could. The next morning, Andrea opened the box. It had been in her closet for 5 years, the top taped shut, the label long peeled off. Inside were photos, a marriage that ended in one voicemail, a son that only lived 4 months, and a tiny pair of baby shoes no one ever wore outside a hospital room. Andrea had never told anyone on the street. She didn't want pity, didn't want to be the woman who lost a child. But when her son died, something inside her broke, something she'd never quite put back. And when the Davidsons moved in, when she saw Wendy playing alone, when she saw Sarah leave for work in that dark SUV, she didn't see a family. She saw a crack in the world she'd spent 5 years trying to control. Across the block, Wendy sat in her room with a shoebox of her own. Only hers was full of rocks, smooth ones, bumpy ones that sparkled, ones that didn't. She held up the one she'd found near the mailbox, the one that started it all. It didn't look dangerous. It didn't look criminal. But that didn't stop the police from coming. "Mommy," she asked from her doorway. Sarah was working at the dining room table, half typing, half thinking. Wendy held the rock in both hands. "Why did that lady call the police on me?" Sarah turned slowly. There it was, the question she'd been dreading. "She was scared," Sarah said carefully. "Of me?" "No, baby. She was scared of what she didn't understand." Wendy frowned. "What didn't she understand?" Sarah swallowed. "That someone who looks like you belongs here, just as much as anyone else." Wendy looked down at her shoes. After a pause, she whispered, "I don't think I do anymore." Sarah's heart cracked wide open. She stood, walked over, and knelt down to meet Wendy's eyes. "Yes, you do," she said gently. "You belong everywhere your heart wants to go. But what if someone else calls again?" Sarah took a long breath. "Then they'll have to answer to me. Every single time. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong just for being yourself, we want to hear your story in the comments. And if you believe kids like Wendy deserve better, subscribe. These stories matter." Later that afternoon, Wendy returned to her favorite corner of the front yard. No bike, no magnifying glass, just her rock box and the Oklahoma sun warming her knees. From across the street, Andrea stood on her porch. She watched the girl for a few seconds, then stepped down the stairs. Each step felt like walking into a thunderstorm. She crossed the street slowly, hands empty, shoulders low, no phone this time, no accusations. Wendy looked up. The woman who scared her was standing just a few feet away. "I didn't bring my magnifying glass today," Wendy said. Andrea's throat tightened. I brought something for you," she managed to say, reaching into her cardigan pocket. She held out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a magnifying glass. Metal frame, real glass, no plastic. "I used to work at the Historical Museum," she said. "That one's from our geology exhibit. You can really see the details." Wendy didn't take it right away. She looked to her mother, who stood nearby. Sarah gave a slow, cautious nod. Wendy reached out, took the pouch, peered through the lens, then smiled, just a little. Andrea knelt down, her voice quiet. "When I saw you that day," she said, "I didn't see a child. I saw something I didn't understand, and that's my fault, not yours." Wendy blinked, unsure how to respond. Andrea added softly, "You belong here. You always did." From the porch, Sarah watched the scene unfold. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to protect Wendy, wrap her up in a bubble, shield her from the world. But part of her knew this moment might do more than her lectures ever could. Still, this wasn't a story of neat apologies and perfect healing. Andrea stood and walked back home, slowly alone. Wendy stayed outside holding the new magnifying glass to the light. And Sarah? She closed her laptop because it was time to act, not just as a mother, but as chief of police. The following Sunday, the wind turned cold in Ponca City. Not winter cold, but the kind of early October breeze that carried leaves across sidewalks and made kids zip up their jackets even when they didn't want to. Wendy stood at the edge of the sidewalk, one sparkly sneaker on the concrete, the other in the grass. She clutched her new magnifying glass in one hand and her favorite rock in the other. Across the street, Andrea was back on her porch, not watching, just sitting. No coffee, no phone. Just the silence of a woman who still didn't know what to say. And then something happened. Wendy looked across. Andrea looked back. And Wendy lifted her magnifying glass and gave a small wave. Not big, not cheerful, just a little acknowledgement that she saw her. Andrea didn't wave back, but she smiled, a real one, and for now, that was enough. Inside the Davidson house, Sarah was folding laundry at the kitchen table. One of Wendy's unicorn socks had gone missing again. She smiled to herself, half-hearted, half-tired. The front door opened and closed softly. "Mom?" Wendy's voice came from the hallway. "Can I go to Mrs. Chen's garden? She said Sarah I could come help into pick the last tomatoes. You stay where I can see you, okay?" Wendy nodded. "Okay." Then she hesitated. "Can I bring my magnifying glass?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" Wendy looked down. "I think so." Sarah gave a quiet nod. "Okay, baby." 20 minutes later, Wendy was kneeling beside the raised garden beds in Mrs. Chen's yard. She wasn't looking at tomatoes. She was holding up her magnifying glass to a fuzzy caterpillar inching across a leaf. "See that?" she said softly. "That means he's going to be a butterfly soon." Mrs. Chen knelt beside her, smiling. "You're very smart," she said. "Very kind." Wendy looked up. "Do you think people can change too?" Mrs. Chen's smile faded into something gentler. Yes, I think people can change, but first they must see what they do and feel it. Wendy nodded slowly, eyes still on the caterpillar. Back at the Davidson home, Sarah answered the knock at the door without even checking the window. She knew who it was. Andrea stood there, not with shame, but not with certainty either. She held a manila envelope in one hand. "I didn't come to say anything new," Andrea said. "I came to return something." She opened the envelope and handed Sarah a small plastic shard, the broken handle of Wendy's original purple magnifying glass. "I found this in my trash," she said. "After the meeting. I must have thrown it away that day." Sarah took it slowly. "Thank you." They stood there, two women who lived 20 steps from each other, and worlds apart. Andrea looked past Sarah for a second. "I've been learning a lot," she said. "About fear, about projection, about how I've never had to question my own presence anywhere, and what that means for someone like you, like Wendy." Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Andrea nodded once. "That's all." She turned to go. That night, Wendy was brushing her teeth when Sarah tapped on the doorframe. "You okay in there?" Wendy nodded, foam in her mouth. Sarah walked in, sat on the edge of the tub. "I saw you wave to Andrea today," Wendy spit. She looked sad. Sarah looked at her daughter. "How did that make you feel?" Wendy shrugged. "Like, maybe she's not mean, just broken." Sarah reached over and gently ran her hand over Wendy's head. "You're a lot wiser than you know." Wendy grinned a little. "Daddy used to say that too." Sarah's smile faded. She whispered, "I miss him too." The neighborhood felt different that week. Not fixed, not healed, but softer. Wendy was invited to her first playdate since the incident, with Emma from school. The HOA newsletter went out with a new section on bias awareness, community compassion. Small, but there. And Andrea. She planted new flowers in her yard, purple ones, and never closed her blinds again. On Friday afternoon, Sarah got a call from the mayor's office. They wanted her to speak on a state panel. Race, community, and law enforcement. She said yes. But her stomach sank as she hung up. Because while the cameras and the statements mattered, none of that changed the way her daughter had clutched her unicorn and cried. None of that brought back the peace of the morning before it all happened. None of it made her feel safer letting Wendy ride her bike alone. Across the room, Wendy sat at the dining table, quietly writing something on a folded sheet of paper. Sarah walked over. "What's that?" Wendy smiled. "A card." Sarah leaned in. It read, "Dear Miss Andrea, thank you for the magnifying glass. I still like rocks. Sincerely, Wendy." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat, but before she could say anything, Wendy added, "Do you think she still thinks I don't belong?" Sarah knelt beside her and whispered, "I think maybe she's just starting to realize you always did. But peace doesn't last, not in stories like this, and the next storm was already on the horizon. It started with a post, a grainy cell phone photo, a blurred zoom-in on Wendy holding her new magnifying glass by the school gate. No caption, just the image. And then the comments began. "That's the same kid, right? They let her back at the school? What if she wasn't looking at rocks that day?" We still don't know the full story. By 4 p.m., the post had over 100 shares. By 5, Sarah's phone was ringing non-stop. That night, Wendy was coloring at the table when Sarah got the call from the school principal. "Chief Davidson," he said gently, "we've had some complaints from parents. Some of them don't feel safe. They're asking why Wendy hasn't been formally reviewed for behavioral issues." Sarah gripped the back of the chair. "She's 7, she said slowly, "and she hasn't done anything wrong." "I know that," the principal said, "but this has become a distraction, and the board is under pressure." Sarah went quiet, then said, "Thanks for letting me know," and hung up. At dinner, Wendy noticed her mum wasn't eating. "Mummy?" Sarah looked up. Wendy held out a drawing. It showed a girl with sparkly shoes holding hands with a butterfly. "This one's you," she said, "because butterflies are strong." Sarah smiled, but only for a second. Then her eyes dropped to the envelope from the school sitting beside her plate. Andrea saw the post too. It had been uploaded by a parent in the Maple Grove Moms private group. And though Andrea didn't like it, didn't comment, didn't share, she also didn't speak up. Not once. Not even when she saw people twisting the story. She stayed silent. And Wendy noticed. On Monday morning, Wendy's name wasn't called for the morning art project. She raised her hand, confused. The substitute teacher smiled thinly and said, "Oh, I think you're working in the library today." Wendy didn't understand. She walked down the hall alone, holding her drawing supplies like they might fall apart in her hands. In the library, she sat at a table by herself. One of the aides kept glancing at her, whispering into her walkie-talkie. Wendy stared down at the rock in her pocket. It didn't feel like treasure anymore. Sarah stormed into the school that afternoon. She didn't wear her badge, didn't need it. "I want to speak to whoever made the decision to isolate my daughter," she said, voice sharp and contained. "I want every note, every complaint, every coward who didn't come to me directly." The staff fumbled. The principal wasn't available. The board hadn't approved a statement yet. Sarah stood in the front office lobby and said clearly, "She was coloring, with crayons, and you treated her like a liability." Then she turned and left, and the walls trembled behind her. That night, Wendy wrote a letter. Her mum found it folded under her pillow. "Dear Miss Andrea, I thought you were sorry, but now people are saying I don't belong again. Did you change your mind?" Sarah stood in the hallway holding that letter with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Andrea, meanwhile, sat in her living room. The group chat was full of garbage, her phone, half-truths, racist undertones. She thought about saying something, typing, deleting, typing again. But in the end, she just watched, too afraid to be wrong again, too afraid to be right alone. And by staying silent, she said more than any comment ever could. Have you ever felt like silence hurt more than the words? Tell us in the comments, because sometimes staying quiet is the loudest choice of all. And if this part of the story hit you harder than you expected, subscribe, you're not alone. Later that week, Wendy didn't go rock hunting, didn't touch her magnifying glass, didn't smile when Mrs. Chen brought cookies. She just sat on the front steps with her arms around her knees and stared at the mailbox across the street. And inside the house, Sarah looked at her daughter, so small, so quiet, and whispered, "I did everything right." And still the world tried to break her. Still the apology faded like smoke. Still her baby girl sat on the porch, not like a scientist or an explorer, but like someone who had already been told, too many times, that she didn't belong. It had been 4 days since Wendy smiled, 4 days since she touched her rocks, 4 days since she asked to ride her bike, or said good morning, or drew another butterfly. And it was killing Sarah in a way no press conference or protest ever could, because no one prepares you for the moment when your child starts believing the world sees them as broken and begins to believe it might be true. Down the block, Andrea stood on her porch, holding the letter. Wendy's handwriting, still wobbly, still sweet, but every word landed like a bruise. "I thought you were sorry, but now people are saying I don't belong again. Did you change your mind?" Andrea read it 3 times, then once more, just to let the ache set in. She could have said she didn't know about the new gossip, could have blamed the neighborhood or the school board or the group chat. But none of that mattered. What mattered was a 7-year-old girl believed again that she was unwanted, and Andrea hadn't done a thing to stop it. That night, Sarah came home late. Her shift had run over. Another press briefing, another panel, another statement. None of it mattered anymore. She opened the front door and froze. Wendy was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by all her rocks. She wasn't playing with them. She was dividing them. "Baby?" Sarah asked. Wendy looked up. Her voice was small. "These ones are the good rocks," she said, "and these are the bad ones." Sarah knelt beside her. "There's no such thing as a bad rock," she whispered. Wendy didn't answer. She just kept sorting. Sarah sat up half the night. She thought about quitting, about taking Wendy somewhere new and somewhere quieter, where she didn't have to be chief first and mother second, where her daughter wouldn't be seen as a threat in sparkly shoes. But then she thought, maybe running away doesn't change the lesson. Maybe staying is how you teach the world to stop punishing children for growing up in the wrong skin. Still, she felt paralyzed, until the doorbell rang. It was just past 7 a.m. She opened the door and saw Andrea. No envelope, no apology script, just her, palms open, eyes exhausted. Sarah didn't speak. Andrea took a breath. "Do you remember," she said softly, "when we first moved in, 2 summers ago?" Sarah blinked. "You were walking Wendy in a stroller. I was trimming my hedges. You waved and I didn't wave back." Sarah said nothing. "I saw you," Andrea went on, "but I didn't wave because I didn't know how. You were so confident, so present. You looked like everything I wasn't." A pause. "I've been carrying so much shame from losing my son. I didn't realize I started punishing other people for being whole." Sarah's expression softened. "I didn't mean to look at Wendy that day and see danger," Andrea said. "But I did, and it took her letter to make me realize I haven't changed nearly as much as I thought I had." Another pause. "Let me fix it." Later that afternoon, Sarah sat with Wendy on the porch. "Do you remember what you told me about rocks?" she asked. Wendy looked up. "What?" "That even the ugliest ones can sparkle if you turn them the right way." Wendy nodded slowly. "Well," Sarah said, "someone wants to try again." That Saturday, something small, but seismic, happened. Wendy was invited to help host the school's fall science fair. Not just attend, host. Mrs. Chen made the banner, the principal made space. And Andrea? She set up the geology table. No big speech, no big show, but she placed a tiny plaque on the table, next to the display of rocks and magnifying glasses. Curated by Wendy Davidson, age 7, because the best discoveries are right under our feet. When Wendy arrived, her face lit up. She ran her fingers over the plaque like it was gold. "Can I go tell her thank you?" she asked her mom. Sarah nodded, but before Wendy could step away, she whispered, "Are you proud of me?" Sarah knelt. "I've never been prouder." Later that evening, Andrea approached quietly. "I know this doesn't fix everything," she said. Sarah looked at her. "No, it doesn't." Then she added, "But it's something." Andrea smiled. "You think she'll ever really forgive me?" Sarah's answer was quiet. She waved. Andrea exhaled. "I'll take it." And inside her backpack that night, Wendy placed her favorite rock beside the new plaque. No bad pile, no good pile, just belonging, just believing. 2 weeks later, Wendy stood in front of her school auditorium, holding a microphone twice the size of her hand. Behind her, a banner read, "Future Scientists of America, 2nd grade showcase." In front of her, rows of folding chairs, parents, teachers, news cameras, and somewhere in the crowd, a woman in a grey cardigan holding a clipboard in her lap, watching silently. Her name was Andrea Smith, and this time she wasn't hiding behind a window. Wendy cleared her throat. "My name is Wendy Davidson," she said softly into the mic, "and this is my favorite rock." She held up a small, glittery stone, the same one she found on Maple
Everyone
Street.
leaned in.
"This rock is important," she said, "because it looks kind of boring, but when you look close, it sparkles." She paused. "Some people look at things and only see what they're afraid of, but science says you should look closer." The auditorium was still, not a whisper, not a cough. Wendy smiled and lifted her magnifying glass. "And now, I'm going to show you what I see." In the back row, Sarah wiped her eyes, not because she was sad, but because her daughter had just turned trauma into truth, fear into purpose. Sarah wasn't Wendy's shield anymore. Wendy was becoming her own. After the showcase, Kids ran around comparing rocks and caterpillars and messy dioramas. But Wendy walked straight over to Andrea. She held out the plaque. "I thought you might want to keep it," she said. Andrea blinked. "You're giving it to me." Wendy shrugged. "You helped make it, so you kinda belong to it too." Andrea didn't say anything. She just nodded, hugged the plaque to her chest and whispered, "Thank you, Wendy." Outside, the sun was starting to set over the parking lot. Sarah placed a hand on Wendy's shoulder. "Ready to go home, little scientist?" Wendy giggled. "Can we stop by the mailbox on the way?" Sarah smiled. "Looking for another rock?" "Nope," Wendy said. "Then why?" Wendy turned. "To see if anyone else needs help seeing what's really there. Do you believe true change can happen, even between neighbors who once stood on opposite sides of fear? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you even a little, don't just scroll. Subscribe. Because stories like this deserve to be seen." And as Wendy stepped into the golden light, holding her magnifying glass like a telescope to the future, she whispered something only her mom could hear. "I didn't mean to be black." Sarah looked down, heart tightening. But before she could respond, Wendy added, smiling, "Now I know I don't have to apologize for it." And that was the real ending. Not the sirens, not the shouting, not even the apology. The real ending was a little girl who had once cried on a sidewalk, now walking proudly across it, unapologetic, unafraid, and fully, beautifully belonging.